Marcus Johnson was a man of few words, but his presence spoke volumes. He lived in a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. The town wasn't exactly diverse. Most people looked alike, shared similar backgrounds, and rarely ventured beyond their comfort zones. Marcus stood out, not just because he was the only black man in the area, but because of how he carried himself. There was a calmness about him, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate, even when he wasn't saying anything. He worked as a mechanic at the local garage, fixing cars with precision and care. Customers often joked that Marcus could fix anything, whether it was a sputtering engine or a stubborn flat tire. But what many didn't know was that Marcus had another side to him. When he wasn't under the hood of a car, he spent his evenings painting murals on large canvases in his modest apartment. These weren't ordinary paintings. They were vibrant depictions of African culture, history, and pride. Bold colors danced across the canvas, telling stories of resilience, beauty, and hope. For Marcus, these murals were more than art. They were a way to connect with his roots and express who he truly was. Despite his talents and kindness, life hadn't always been easy for Marcus. Growing up, he'd faced challenges that left lasting impressions on him. Kids at school would tease him for being too dark, making fun of his complexion while praising lighter-skinned classmates. Teachers sometimes overlooked him, assuming he wasn't as capable as others simply because of the color of his skin. Even as an adult, some customers at the garage treated him differently, questioning his expertise or acting surprised when he fixed their cars so quickly. Over time, Marcus learned to brush off these moments, choosing not to let them define him. Still, deep down, the sting lingered. One crisp autumn afternoon, Marcus finished up his shift at the garage and decided to take a long walk home. It was one of those rare days when the air felt fresh and the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting warm shadows on the sidewalk. As he strolled past the park, he noticed a group of teenagers hanging out near the basketball court. They were loud, laughing and tossing a ball back and forth. At first, Marcus paid them no mind, lost in his thoughts as he admired the changing leaves. But then, one of their voices cut through the peaceful atmosphere. "Hey, look at this guy," one of the boys called out, pointing directly at Marcus. His friends stopped playing and turned their attention toward him. Marcus froze for a moment, unsure if he should keep walking or acknowledge them. Before he could decide, the taunts began. "Yo, you're so dark, we can barely see you," one of them shouted, followed by snickers from the rest of the group. "Yeah, bet he blends into the night like a ninja," another chimed in, doubling over with laughter. The third boy stepped closer, squinting dramatically as if inspecting Marcus. "Nah, I think he's too dark even for ninjas. You probably scare people away with that skin tone." Their words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He felt heat rise to his cheeks, embarrassment mixing with anger. Part of him wanted to lash out to defend himself and tell them exactly what he thought of their cruel remarks. But another part, the stronger part, reminded him that reacting wouldn't change anything. Instead, he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and continued walking without looking back. Each step felt heavier than the last, but he refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him upset. As he walked away, Marcus couldn't help but wonder why people like them existed. Why did they feel the need to tear others down? Was it insecurity, ignorance, or something deeper rooted in society itself? Whatever the reason, he knew better than to let their hatred weigh him down. Yet their words echoed in his mind long after he reached home. That evening, as he sat alone in his apartment staring at his reflection in the mirror, Marcus felt a wave of emotions crash over him. Sadness, frustration, confusion, it all swirled together, threatening to pull him under. For years, Marcus had prided himself on rising above negativity. He believed in focusing on the good in life and letting go of the bad. But tonight, something felt different. Their insults had struck a nerve, stirring up old wounds he thought he'd healed. Sitting there in silence, Marcus realized that ignoring the pain wasn't enough anymore. Something inside him was shifting, urging him to do more, to turn this hurt into something meaningful. Little did he know this seemingly insignificant encounter would set off a chain reaction that would change not only his life, but also the lives of countless others. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped the town, Marcus made a decision. This wasn't going to break him. If anything, it was going to make him stronger, and maybe, just maybe, it would inspire others to see the world through a different lens. The night was unusually quiet, save for the faint hum of a distant train passing through town. Marcus sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, staring at the blank canvas leaning against the far wall of his small apartment. His mind replayed the events of the day over and over again like a broken record he couldn't turn off. The teenager's cruel words echoed in his ears. Too dark. Can barely see you. Scare people away. Each phrase cut deeper than the last, reopening old wounds he thought had healed long ago. For years, Marcus had convinced himself that he was immune to such insults. He told himself that ignorance was their problem, not his. But tonight, their words felt heavier, sharper, as if they had found cracks in the armor he'd built around his heart. Sitting there in the dim light of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, Marcus began to question things he hadn't dared to think about in years. Was there truth to what they said? Did his darkness make him less worthy, less valuable? These questions gnawed at him, unsettling the foundation of confidence he'd worked so hard to build. As he wrestled with these thoughts, his gaze drifted to an old photograph sitting on the cluttered coffee table. It was a picture of him and his grandmother, taken during one of their Sunday afternoons together. She was wearing her favorite floral dress, her silver hair neatly braided, and she held Marcus close with a warmth that could melt even the coldest hearts. In the photo, she looked directly into the camera, her eyes filled with pride and love. For a moment, Marcus felt as though she were right there beside him, watching him struggle. His grandmother, Mama Ruth, had been his rock growing up. She raised him after his parents passed away in a car accident when he was just 8 years old. Life hadn't been easy for them, money was tight, and living in a predominantly white neighborhood meant facing prejudice almost daily. But Mama Ruth never let bitterness take root in their home. Instead, she taught Marcus to embrace who he was, to find strength in his identity, and to carry himself with dignity no matter how others treated him. Her voice often rang in his ears during tough times. Your darkness is your crown, Marcus. Wear it proudly. They may try to dim your light, but they'll never succeed. Tonight, however, those words felt distant, almost unreachable. Marcus picked up the photograph and traced the edges with his fingers, as if trying to hold on to something tangible from the past. Memories flooded back. Mama Ruth telling him stories about their ancestors who endured slavery, segregation, and countless injustices yet still managed to rise above it all. She spoke of their resilience, their creativity, their ability to find beauty in the darkest moments. We are survivors, she would say, and survival is an art form. But now, sitting alone in his apartment, Marcus wondered if survival was enough. Had he been surviving or simply enduring? Was there a difference? He glanced at the mirror hanging on the opposite wall and hesitated before standing up to face it. When he finally did, he stared at his reflection for what felt like hours. His skin was deep brown, rich and smooth, kissed by generations of history and heritage. Yet, in this moment, it felt like a burden rather than a blessing. Why couldn't he see himself the way Mama Ruth saw him? Why did the world insist on making him feel like an outsider? Frustrated, Marcus turned away from the mirror and paced around the room. His eyes landed on his paint supplies stacked neatly. In the corner, brushes, palettes, tubes of vibrant colors waiting to be used. An idea flickered in his mind, faint but persistent. Maybe painting could help him process everything he was feeling. Art had always been his refuge, a way to channel emotions too complex for words. Perhaps it could guide him out of this storm, just as it had done countless times before. He grabbed a large blank canvas and set it up on his easel. Then, without much thought, he dipped his brush into a jar of black paint and began to stroke it across the surface. At first, the lines were hesitant, unsure, but as he continued, something shifted inside him. The act of creating became meditative, almost therapeutic. Slowly, shapes emerged. a silhouette of a man standing tall under a starry sky. Around him, shades of brown blended seamlessly, forming gradients that seemed to glow despite the absence of bright colors. Marcus added hints of gold and bronze, symbols of royalty and strength, weaving them into the fabric of the piece. As the painting came to life, Marcus realized he wasn't just creating art. He was reclaiming his narrative. Every brushstroke was a declaration: I am here. I exist. I matter. The figure in the painting stood confidently, unapologetically, radiating power and grace. Beneath it, Marcus wrote in bold letters, "Shades of Majesty." The title itself was a rebellion against the notion that darkness equaled inferiority. To Marcus, every shade of brown was majestic, regal, worthy of celebration. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking outside. Golden sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room and casting a soft glow on the newly completed mural. Marcus stepped back to admire his work, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. For the first time since the incident at the park, he felt grounded, centered. The bully's words still lingered in the back of his mind, but they no longer held the same weight. Through his art, Marcus had transformed pain into purpose, turning a moment of weakness into a powerful statement. Later that morning, Marcus decided to share his creation with the world. He snapped a few photos of the mural and posted them online, along with a heartfelt message explaining its meaning. He wrote about the encounter with the teenagers, the doubts it stirred within him, and how he chose to respond, not with anger, but with creativity and self-reflection. He ended the post with a simple yet profound reminder: our worth isn't determined by the opinions of others. We are enough, exactly as we are. Within hours, the post gained traction. Friends, acquaintances, and strangers alike began commenting, sharing their own experiences of being judged or marginalized because of their appearance. Some thanked Marcus for putting into words what they had struggled to articulate. Others expressed admiration for his courage and resilience. By the end of the day, the post had gone viral, reaching thousands of people across social media platforms. Messages poured in from all corners of the globe, each one carrying a story of pain, hope, or gratitude. One message in particular stood out to Marcus. It was from a young girl named Amara who wrote, "I've always hated my dark skin because kids at school tease me. Seeing your painting made me realize that I'm beautiful too. Thank you for showing me that." Reading her words brought tears to Marcus's eyes. He had created the mural for himself, to heal his own wounds, but now he saw its potential to inspire others, to remind them of their inherent worth. That night, as Marcus lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The bully's cruel remarks hadn't defeated him. Instead, they had ignited a spark within him, a spark that would grow into a flame, lighting the way for others to see themselves and each other in a new, more compassionate light. And though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Marcus knew one thing for certain: he was ready to walk it one step at a time. The days following the viral post were a whirlwind for Marcus. His phone buzzed constantly with notifications, likes, comments, and messages flooding in from people he'd never met. Strangers shared their stories of pain and triumph, many thanking him for giving them the courage to embrace who they were. Some sent photos of themselves holding signs that read, "Shades of Majesty," while others posted videos of themselves reciting his poem or discussing his message with friends and family. It was overwhelming but deeply fulfilling. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. But as the initial excitement settled, Marcus began to think more deeply about what he wanted to do next. He realized that sharing his art online was just the beginning. If he truly wanted to make a difference, he needed to take action, not just digitally but in real life. The bully's cruel words had sparked this journey, and now it was time to confront them head-on. Marcus knew that forgiveness wasn't easy, but he also believed that true change started with understanding. So, after much thought, he decided to reach out to the teenagers who had mocked him. Through mutual acquaintances, Marcus learned that one of the boys, named Jake, worked at the local convenience store. Another, Tyler, attended the same high school where Marcus occasionally volunteered as a guest speaker during career days. The third, Liam, played basketball for the town's youth league. With this information, Marcus reached out to their parents and arranged a meeting at the community center downtown. He made it clear that his intention wasn't to shame or punish them, but to have an open conversation. To his surprise, all three agreed to meet him. On the day of the meeting, Marcus arrived, early, standing by the mural he had painted outside the community center, titled Shades of Majesty. The massive artwork depicted vibrant shades of brown skin against a backdrop of stars, symbolizing beauty, resilience, and hope. Beneath the mural, Marcus had written the poem he had shared online, its words bold and unapologetic. As the teenagers approached, their body language spoke volumes. They shuffled nervously, avoiding eye contact, clearly unsure of what to expect. Marcus greeted them warmly, inviting them to sit on the bench near the mural. For a few moments, no one said anything. The air was thick with tension, and Marcus could sense their unease. Finally, he broke the silence. "I'm not here to yell at you or make you feel bad," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I just want us to talk, to really understand each other." He explained how their words had affected him, describing the doubts and insecurities they had stirred up. He didn't sugarcoat anything. Instead, he was honest about the pain he had felt, but he also emphasized that he wasn't angry, at least not anymore. "What I want to know is why you said those things," he continued. "Why did you feel the need to hurt someone else?" At first, the teenagers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. Then Jake, the boy who had called Marcus too dark, spoke up. "I don't know. I guess we were just messing around," he mumbled, shrugging his shoulders. "We didn't mean anything by it." Marcus nodded slowly, encouraging them to dig deeper. "Messing around can still hurt people," he said gently. "Words have power whether you intend for them to or not. Think about it, if someone said those things to you, how would you feel?" Tyler, the second boy, shifted uncomfortably. "It's not like we're racist or anything," he muttered. I don't know, we thought it was funny." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "Funny to who, though? Was it funny to me? Or was it just funny because it made you feel better about yourselves?" His tone wasn't accusatory. It was probing, urging them to reflect on their actions. When we put others down, it often says more about us than it does about them. Why do you think that is? Liam, the third boy, finally chimed in, his voice barely above a whisper. "I guess maybe we were trying to fit in," he admitted. "Everyone laughs when we joke around like that, so we kept doing it." Marcus nodded, sensing an opening. "Fitting in can be tough," he acknowledged. "But sometimes the cost of fitting in is too high. When you laugh at someone else's expense, you might gain temporary approval from your friends, but you lose something even more important: respect, for yourself and for others." The teenagers fell silent again, processing his words. Marcus took the opportunity to share more of his story, explaining how he had grown up facing similar prejudices and how those experiences had shaped him. He talked about his grandmother, Mama Ruth, and the lessons she had taught him about resilience and self-worth. He described the nights he had spent painting Shades of Majesty, channeling his pain into art as a way to heal. By the time he finished speaking, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The boys seemed less defensive, more reflective. Finally, Jake spoke up again, this time with genuine emotion in his voice. "I'm sorry," he said, looking directly at Marcus. "I didn't realize how much my words could hurt someone. I didn't mean to make you feel bad." Marcus smiled softly, appreciating the sincerity in Jake's apology. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "Apologies are important, but actions matter even more. What will you do differently moving forward?" Tyler and Liam exchanged glances before chiming in. "We'll try to be better," Tyler promised. "No more jokes like that. We'll call it out if we hear someone else doing it too." Marcus felt a surge of hope as he listened to their promises. He knew change wouldn't happen overnight, but this was a start, a small yet significant step toward growth. Before wrapping up the conversation, he invited the boys to help him repaint the mural, suggesting they add their own touches to the artwork. At first, they hesitated, unsure of what to contribute, but Marcus encouraged them to express themselves freely. Together, they spent the afternoon adding new elements to the mural: stars, flowers, and abstract patterns that represented unity and diversity. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the freshly painted mural, Marcus stood back to admire their collaborative effort. The once solitary piece now felt alive with collaboration and connection. Turning to the teenagers, he said, "This mural represents more than just art. It's a reminder that we all have the power to create something beautiful, even out of pain. You've taken the first step today, and that's something to be proud of." The boys nodded, their faces softening with newfound understanding. Though the scars of prejudice ran deep, Marcus knew that moments like these planted seeds of empathy and compassion. And sometimes, that was all it took to spark lasting change. That night, as Marcus walked home, he couldn't help but smile. The encounter had been challenging, emotional, and exhausting, but it had also been transformative. He had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for healing, not just for himself, but for others as well. As he looked up at the starry sky, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was only the beginning of his journey, and he was ready to keep going, one meaningful step at a time. The ripple effect of Marcus's actions began almost immediately. Word of his meeting with the teenagers spread quickly through the small town, fueled by whispers at the grocery store, posts on social media, and casual conversations over coffee. People were intrigued, not just by the story itself, but by the way Marcus had handled the situation. Instead of seeking revenge or harboring resentment, he had chosen empathy and education. His approach struck a chord with many, sparking discussions about bullying, prejudice, and the power of forgiveness. Local leaders took notice too. The principal of the high school where Tyler attended invited Marcus to speak during an assembly. At first, Marcus hesitated. Public speaking wasn't something he enjoyed. He preferred letting his art do the talking. But as he thought about it, he realized this was an opportunity to reach even more people, to plant seeds of understanding in young minds before harmful attitudes took root. With some encouragement from friends and supporters, he agreed. On the day of the assembly, Marcus stood backstage, clutching a notebook filled with notes and sketches. He could hear the buzz of hundreds of students filing into the auditorium, their laughter and chatter echoing through the halls. Nervous energy coursed through him, but he reminded himself why he was there: to share his story, to inspire change, and to remind these kids that their actions mattered. Taking a deep breath, he stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent as Marcus introduced himself. He started by sharing his experience with the teenagers who had bullied him, recounting the incident without malice or bitterness. "I could have stayed angry," he said, pacing slowly across the stage. "But anger doesn't fix anything. It doesn't teach us how to be better. What I wanted, what I needed, was for them to understand why their words hurt. And once they understood, they had the chance to grow." He went on to explain the mural project and how working together had helped bridge the gap between them. "Art has a way of bringing people together," he continued. "When we create something meaningful, we connect in ways words alone can't achieve." That's what happened with those boys. They didn't just apologize, they took responsibility. They chose to learn, to listen, and to act differently. As Marcus spoke, he noticed a shift in the audience. Some students leaned forward, hanging on his every word. Others exchanged glances, perhaps thinking about times they had teased someone or witnessed bullying themselves. A few wiped away tears, moved by his vulnerability. By the time he finished, the entire auditorium erupted in applause, a standing ovation that caught Marcus off guard. For a moment, he simply stood there, overwhelmed by the response. Afterward, dozens of students approached him, eager to ask questions or share their own experiences. One girl, barely 14, handed him a folded piece of paper. "Thank you," she whispered before hurrying away. Later, when Marcus unfolded it, He found a heartfelt note. "You made me realize I'm not alone. I get picked on too, but now I know I don't have to let it define me." Reading her words brought tears to his eyes. This was why he did what he did, not for fame or recognition, but to show others that they weren't powerless against hate. Word of Marcus's impactful speech reached beyond the high school. Community organizers invited him to lead workshops at local youth centers, libraries, and churches. Each session followed a similar format. Marcus would share his story, guide participants in creating collaborative art projects, and facilitate open discussions about identity, empathy, and self-worth. These events became safe spaces where people of all ages could express themselves freely, unburdened by judgment or fear. Many attendees left inspired, vowing to treat others with kindness and respect. One particularly memorable workshop took place at the Boys and Girls Club. Dozens of children, ranging from elementary schoolers to teenagers, gathered around large canvases set up in the gymnasium. Marcus handed out paints and brushes, encouraging everyone to contribute however they felt comfortable. Some painted abstract shapes, while others drew portraits or wrote messages like "Be kind and love yourself." As the mural came to life, so did the room. The air buzzed with laughter, conversation, and collaboration. During a break, Marcus noticed a quiet boy sitting off to the side watching the others work. His name tag read Ethan. Curious, Marcus walked over and sat beside him. "Hey there," he said warmly. "What's on your mind?" Ethan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I'm not good at art," he muttered. "I'll just mess it up." Marcus smiled gently. "Art isn't about being perfect," he replied. "It's about expressing yourself. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Why don't you try adding something small? Maybe start with a color you like." After a moment's hesitation, Ethan picked up a brush and dabbed it into a pot of blue paint. Tentatively, he added a swirl to the corner of the canvas. When no one criticized or laughed at his contribution, he grew bolder, adding more strokes until a vibrant wave emerged. By the end of the session, Ethan was beaming with pride, showing off his work to anyone who would look. Seeing his transformation reaffirmed Marcus's belief in the healing power of creativity. Meanwhile, the three teenagers, Jake, Tyler, and Liam, began to change as well. Their initial apology to Marcus hadn't been an empty gesture. They genuinely wanted to make amends. Inspired by his example, they started standing up against bullying whenever they encountered it. At school, they called out classmates who made racist or derogatory remarks. On the basketball court, they defended teammates who were targets of harassment. Slowly, but surely, their peers began to see them differently, not as troublemakers, but as allies. Jake, in particular, underwent a profound personal transformation. After learning more about Marcus's background, he became curious about African culture and history. He borrowed books from the library, watched documentaries, and even joined a multicultural club at school. One evening, he showed up at Marcus's apartment with a gift, a handmade card decorated with colorful patterns and the words, "Thank you for teaching me." Inside, Jake had written a short essay about everything he had learned, including a promise to keep educating himself and others. Tyler and Liam also found ways to give back. They volunteered at the community center, helping organize events and mentor younger kids. Through these experiences, they discovered a sense of purpose they had never known before. For the first time, they felt like they were making a positive impact on the world around them. As weeks turned into months, Marcus's influence continued to grow. Local newspapers featured stories about his anti-bullying initiatives, drawing attention from neighboring towns and cities. Soon, invitations poured in from across the country, asking him to speak at schools, conferences, and community events. Though traveling stretched him thin at times, Marcus couldn't say no. Every new audience represented another opportunity to spread his message of love, acceptance, and resilience. One of the most impactful moments came during a National Educators Conference in Chicago. Standing before thousands of teachers and administrators, Marcus shared his journey from mechanic to advocate, emphasizing the importance of representation and inclusivity in classrooms. Kids need to see themselves reflected in the stories we tell and the lessons we teach, he said passionately. They need to know that their voices matter, that their identities are valid, and that they belong. His speech resonated deeply with the audience, earning a prolonged standing ovation. Afterward, educators lined up to thank him, promising to implement his ideas in their own schools. Several organizations offered partnerships, providing resources and funding to expand his initiatives nationwide. By the end of the conference, Marcus had laid the groundwork for a movement that would touch countless lives. Back home, the mural outside the community center became a symbol of hope and unity. Visitors from neighboring towns came to see it, snapping photos and leaving notes of gratitude taped to its base. Inspired by its success, other communities commissioned Marcus to create similar murals in their areas. Each one carried the same core message: our differences are our strengths. Through it all, Marcus remained humble, always crediting others for their contributions. He knew he couldn't have done any of this alone. The teenagers who had bullied him, the students who had listened to his speeches, the volunteers who had helped paint murals, they were all part of the journey. Together, they had transformed pain into purpose, turning a single act of cruelty into a catalyst for widespread change. And yet, Marcus knew the work was far from over. Prejudice and discrimination still existed, lurking in corners of society, waiting to rear their ugly heads. But he also knew that every step forward mattered. Every mural, every speech, every conversation, it all added up, creating a brighter, kinder future for generations to come. As he looked out at the growing number of people joining his cause, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who dared to believe in the power of compassion and the beauty of diversity. As the months passed, Marcus's efforts began to bear fruit in ways he could never have imagined. What had started as a personal response to an act of cruelty had blossomed into a nationwide movement, touching lives far beyond his small town. His murals became landmarks, symbols of hope and resilience that drew people from all walks of life. Schools adopted his message of self-worth and inclusivity into their curriculums, incorporating discussions about identity, empathy, and cultural appreciation. Teachers reported seeing changes in their students, fewer instances of bullying, more open conversations about race and diversity, and a growing sense of pride among marginalized groups. One particularly transformative initiative was the Shades of Majesty program Marcus launched in collaboration with local schools and community centers. The program combined art workshops with anti-bullying education, teaching children and teens how to express themselves creatively while fostering mutual respect and understanding. Participants worked together on large-scale murals, each contributing their unique style and perspective. These collaborative projects not only celebrated individuality, but also highlighted the beauty of unity, a powerful reminder that differences should be embraced, not feared. The impact of the program extended beyond the walls of classrooms and community centers. Parents noticed shifts in their children's attitudes and behaviors. Kids who once mocked others for being different now stood up for classmates facing ridicule. Families began having deeper conversations at home about prejudice, privilege, and the importance of kindness. One mother wrote to Marcus sharing how her son, once known for teasing kids with darker skin, had come home one evening and insisted they watch documentaries about African history together. He said he wanted to understand where his friends came from, she wrote. I've never been prouder of him. Even businesses and organizations took notice of Marcus's work. Corporations invited him to lead diversity training sessions for employees, helping teams recognize unconscious biases and create more inclusive workplaces. Nonprofits partnered with him to develop campaigns promoting mental health awareness and self-acceptance, especially among young people of color. Art galleries showcased his paintings alongside works by other artists exploring themes of identity and resilience. Each partnership amplified his message, spreading it farther and wider than ever before. But perhaps the most profound transformation occurred within the three teenagers who had once bullied Marcus. Jake, Tyler, and Liam weren't just apologizing anymore. They were actively working to dismantle the prejudices they had once perpetuated. Jake, inspired by Marcus's passion for education, enrolled in a sociology course at the local community college. He devoured books about systemic racism, colonialism, and social justice, often staying up late into the night taking notes. During class discussions, he challenged peers to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality, earning admiration from professors and classmates alike. Tyler found his calling in advocacy work. After volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club, he realized how much he enjoyed mentoring younger kids. He started organizing after-school programs focused on leadership and conflict resolution, encouraging participants to channel their energy into positive outlets like sports, music, and art. His efforts earned him recognition from the mayor, who awarded him a certificate of achievement during a public ceremony. Accepting the honor, Tyler credited Marcus for inspiring him to turn his life around. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be standing here today, I wouldn't have believed them," he said. "But Marcus showed me that change is possible if you're willing to listen and learn." Liam, meanwhile, discovered a talent for storytelling. Drawing inspiration from Marcus's speeches and murals, he began writing essays and poems about his journey from bully to ally. His work caught the attention of a local newspaper editor, who offered him a column to share his reflections with a broader audience. Through his writing, Liam explored topics like guilt, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. Readers responded enthusiastically, praising his honesty and vulnerability. One letter from a former victim of bullying read, "Your words gave me hope. If someone like you can change, maybe there's still good in the world." The ripple effect of their transformations reached even further. Other teens in the community looked up to Jake, Tyler, and Liam, seeing them as role models rather than troublemakers. Some joined their anti-bullying efforts, forming clubs dedicated to promoting kindness and inclusion. Others sought guidance from Marcus himself, asking how they could make amends for past mistakes or support those who had been hurt. It became clear that Marcus's approach, centered on empathy, accountability, and growth, was resonating deeply, with young people hungry for direction. Marcus, too, continued to evolve. While his initial goal had been to heal himself and inspire others, he soon realized that his work was part of something much larger, a collective effort to challenge societal norms and redefine what it meant to be human. He began collaborating with activists, educators, and artists across the country, pooling resources and ideas to tackle issues like racism, sexism, and economic inequality. Together, they organized rallies, fundraisers, and educational campaigns aimed at creating lasting systemic change. One such campaign focused on representation in media and entertainment. Marcus teamed up with filmmakers, writers, and musicians to highlight stories often overlooked or misrepresented in mainstream culture. They produced short films, podcasts, and albums celebrating diverse voices and experiences, ensuring that underrepresented communities saw themselves reflected in art and storytelling. Audiences responded enthusiastically, praising these projects for shedding light on untold narratives and challenging stereotypes. Despite the widespread acclaim, Marcus remained grounded. He knew that true progress required patience, persistence, and humility. There would always be setbacks, moments when old prejudices resurfaced or new challenges arose, but he refused to let cynicism creep in. Instead, he focused on the victories, no matter how small. Every mural completed, every student empowered, every heart changed. It all mattered. By this point, Marcus's story had become a beacon of hope for countless individuals. People shared his journey on social media, in classrooms, and at family dinner tables, using it as a reminder that compassion could triumph over cruelty. Strangers approached him in public, thanking him for giving them the courage to embrace who they were. Young artists sent him photos of their own creations, inspired by his example. Even celebrities weighed in, amplifying his message to millions of followers worldwide. Yet through it all, Marcus stayed true to his roots. He continued working at the garage, fixing cars with the same dedication and care that had earned him loyal customers for years. On weekends, he painted murals in underserved neighborhoods, ensuring that everyone had access to art and inspiration. And whenever doubt crept in, whenever he wondered if he was making a difference, he thought back to Mama Ruth's words. "Your darkness is your crown, Marcus. Wear it proudly." As the years went by, Marcus's legacy grew. Schools named scholarships after him, honoring students committed to social justice and community service. Cities unveiled statues and plaques commemorating his contributions to equality and inclusion. Documentaries chronicled his journey, capturing the raw emotion and unwavering determination that defined his mission. But for Marcus, none of these accolades compared to the everyday moments, the smiles on children's faces as they added their brushstrokes to a mural, the tears of gratitude from parents whose kids finally felt seen and valued, the quiet nods of understanding between strangers brought together by shared humanity. Looking back, Marcus marveled at how far he and so many others had come. What had begun as a painful encounter with bullies had transformed into a movement rooted in love, creativity, and resilience. The teenagers who had mocked him were now advocates for change, proving that even those who caused harm could grow and contribute positively. Communities once divided by ignorance and fear were finding common ground, united by a shared vision of a better future. And yet, Marcus knew the journey wasn't over. Society still grappled with deep-seated inequalities, and the fight for justice would require generations of effort. But he also knew that every step forward counted. Every conversation, every act of kindness, every stroke of paint, it all added up. As long as people continued believing in the power of compassion and the beauty of diversity, there was hope. Standing before a crowd at a national conference, Marcus scanned the sea of faces looking up at him. Among them were teachers, activists, students, parents, even Jake, Tyler, and Liam, now young adults leading initiatives of their own. Smiling warmly, Marcus delivered his closing remarks. "Change begins with us. It starts with listening, learning and loving, not despite our differences, but because of them. We are stronger together, brighter together, more majestic together. Let's keep building a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. Because when we do, we'll discover that our shades of majesty shine brightest when we stand side by side." The room erupted in applause, a wave of cheers and standing ovations echoing through the hall. As Marcus stepped off the stage, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just his story anymore, it belonged to everyone who dared. Years passed, and Marcus's influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways both big and small. The movement he had started, the Shades of Majesty initiative, had grown into a global phenomenon, inspiring millions to embrace their identities, celebrate diversity, and stand against prejudice. Murals bearing the same title dotted cities around the world, from bustling metropolises to quiet rural towns. Each one carried its own unique flair, yet all shared the same core message: that every individual, regardless of skin tone or background, possessed inherent worth and beauty. The teenagers who had once bullied Marcus, Jake, Tyler, and Liam, were now grown men with families and careers of their own. Their transformations remained a testament to the power of redemption and growth. Jake became a high school history teacher, specializing in African and African American studies. His classroom walls were adorned with posters, photographs, and quotes celebrating Black excellence throughout history. Students often commented on how passionate he was about his subject matter, crediting him for sparking their interest in social justice and activism. Tyler dedicated his life to mentoring at-risk youth, founding an organization called Rising Together, which provided resources and support for young people navigating challenges like poverty, discrimination, and self-doubt. Through workshops, counseling sessions, and recreational programs, he helped countless kids discover their potential and build brighter futures. Many of his mentees went on to pursue higher education or start community projects of their own, carrying forward the cycle of empowerment. Liam, meanwhile, became a celebrated author and poet, publishing several books that explored themes of identity, forgiveness, and resilience. His memoir, titled From Shadows to Light, chronicled his journey from being a bully to becoming an advocate for change. It quickly became a bestseller, earning praise from critics and readers alike. Schools across the country added it to their reading lists, using it as a tool to foster discussions about accountability, empathy, and personal growth. At book signings and speaking engagements, Liam often credited Marcus for showing him the path to redemption. "He didn't have to forgive us," Liam would say, "but he did. And because of that, I learned what real strength looks like." Marcus himself remained deeply involved in his work, though age had slowed him down slightly. His hair was streaked with gray, and his hands bore the calluses of decades spent fixing cars and painting murals. Yet his spirit remained as vibrant as ever. He continued traveling, giving speeches, and creating art, always striving to reach new audiences and inspire fresh perspectives. Over time, he shifted his focus toward nurturing the next generation of leaders, empowering young activists, artists, and educators to carry the torch of inclusivity and compassion. One such leader was Amara, the young girl who had written to Marcus years earlier, thanking him for helping her see her dark skin as beautiful. Now a college graduate, Amara had become a prominent advocate for body positivity and self-love. She founded an online platform called Radiant Roots, where people of all ages and backgrounds could share their stories, celebrate their heritage, and connect with others on similar journeys. Her website featured interviews with Marcus, highlighting his wisdom and experiences while encouraging visitors to reflect on their own paths. Amara wasn't alone. Countless individuals inspired by Marcus's story had gone on to make meaningful contributions in their communities. A former student named Ethan, who had once doubted his artistic abilities during a workshop, now taught art classes to underserved children, instilling in them the confidence he had gained from Marcus. Another participant, a shy teenager named Maya, grew up to become a documentary filmmaker, producing films that shed light on marginalized voices and untold histories. Everywhere Marcus looked, he saw evidence of the seeds he had planted taking root and flourishing. Despite his accomplishments, Marcus never sought recognition for himself. Awards lined the shelves of his modest apartment, but they weren't displayed prominently. Instead, they sat tucked away in corners, overshadowed by sketches, paintbrushes, and stacks of letters from people whose lives he had touched. To Marcus, the true measure of success wasn't fame or accolades, it was the impact he had on others. And judging by the outpouring of gratitude he received daily, he knew he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood before a crowd gathered in the town square. The occasion was the unveiling of a new mural, a massive, breathtaking piece that spanned the entire side of the community center. Titled Unity in Diversity, it depicted faces of all colors, genders, and ages, woven together in a tapestry of interconnectedness. Stars sparkled in the background, symbolizing hope and possibility. Beneath the artwork, bold letters spelled out a simple yet profound phrase: "We are one." As Marcus addressed the audience, his voice steady and full of emotion, he reflected on how far they had come. "This mural represents more than just art," he said, gesturing toward the masterpiece behind him. "It's a reflection of who we are and who we aspire to be. Look around you, at your neighbors, your friends, your family. We may look different, speak different languages, or come from different places, but we share something far greater: our humanity. That's what binds us. That's what makes us majestic." The crowd erupted in applause, cheers, and whistles. People hugged one another, tears streaming down their faces as they absorbed the weight of his words. Among the attendees were Jake, Tyler, and Liam, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. For a moment, the four men locked eyes, silently, acknowledging the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as an act of cruelty had transformed into a bond of friendship and mutual respect, a living example of the power of forgiveness and understanding. Later that evening, as Marcus walked home under a sky filled with stars, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The road hadn't been easy. In fact, it had been fraught with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But through it all, he had stayed true to his values, choosing love over hate, creativity over destruction, and hope over despair. And now, looking back, He realized that every step had been worth it. Inside his apartment, Marcus paused to gaze at the photograph of him and Mama Ruth. Her warm smile seemed to glow in the soft lamplight, as if she were proud of the man he had become. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Mama Ruth, you were right. Darkness isn't a burden, it's a gift, it's strength, it's majesty." As he drifted off to sleep that night, Marcus dreamed of murals stretching across continents, connecting hearts and minds in a shared celebration of diversity. In his dream, people of all races, cultures, and backgrounds stood hand in hand, laughing, singing, and creating together. The world was imperfect, yes, but it was also beautiful. And in that beauty, Marcus found solace, knowing that the work he had started would continue long after he was gone. The legacy of Marcus Johnson wasn't confined to paintings or speeches. It lived on in the hearts of those he had inspired. From the teenagers who had once mocked him to the strangers who had found courage through his story, his impact was undeniable. Society still grappled with injustice and inequality, but thanks to Marcus and countless others like him, there was hope. Hope that future generations would inherit a world where differences were celebrated, not feared, where kindness triumphed over cruelty, where everyone, no matter their shade, could stand tall and declare, "I am enough." And so, as Marcus closed his eyes and let sleep take him, he smiled. His journey had been long and winding, filled with pain, triumph, and transformation. But it had also been purposeful, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the boundless potential of compassion. The darkness that had once threatened to dim his light had instead illuminated a path for others to follow. And in that illumination, Marcus found his greatest victory, a world forever changed by the belief that we are all shades of majesty.